Hi there. Um, those of you watching live, those of you catching us later on recording. I know a lot of people are watching these as recordings. Welcome to our weekly Mora medical live stream. My name is Dr. Rock. That is spelled R-A-K and pronounced R-O-C-K. I have Dr. Yashoda here in the house. Hi, Dr. Yashoda.
Hi,
Welcome.
Dr. Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, I love the soft greens and colors in your
I was going to comment on
background.
your background too. That looks amazing.
Yeah, this isn't where my kids are on spring break this week, and we came up to the Russian River, like north of San Francisco Bay Area, and this is just the rental we're at. It is beautiful, but I was looking for a spot to do my visits and whatnot this week, and I was like, oh, perfect.
This is perfect. It has you have like an aura around your head. I don't know if you
Like I'm
saw
some sort of
that.
I did. Yeah, sometimes I move over,
No, no,
so
no,
it
no.
look
It's perfect. It's perfect. Don't move.
uh
Oh my
all right.
goodness.
Well, welcome those of you watching live, those of you watching this as a recording. We're Mora Medical. Dr. Yashoda has been on live stream before. Dr. Yashoda is our Deputy Chief Medical Officer. You want to tell our audience a little bit about Mora Medical and what we do?
Oh, sure. I love to. It's such a passion of mine.
Hmm.
So yeah, at Mora Medical, we basically practice lifestyle medicine, which involves the six pillars of lifestyle medicine. The main one being nutrition, and then we also talk about things like movement or physical activity. We address stress and give you tools to support yourself through stress. We talk about social connections, and we talk about sleep, the power of sleep for
Hmm.
health, and how to really minimize or avoid harmful substances, which I think is all over the news sometimes. But I'm excited about the topic we're going to discuss today, Dr. Rock.
That's right. We are going to discuss motivation, which, we talk about a lot in lifestyle medicine. We talk about behavior change and how people are able to sustain behavior change. And I feel this a lot with myself too, but I hear this from my patients and anyone really is like you go through periods where like you feel motivated and then you go through periods where you're like, I don't really have the motivation. So how do you think about motivation, Dr. Yashoda?
Yeah, I think so much of our behavioral changes that we're trying to accomplish in our life, we kind of depend on this thing called willpower, right? And
Mm.
it's such a flake. I think
That's
I
right.
think if we depended on willpower, many of us will feel lost, many times. But motivation, in my mind, is a little bit different, right? It's really needing to kind of take some time and sort of evaluate where we are in our life and where we want to go, and finding that deep, deep, deep desire to make whatever changes it might be, to in order to be better version of ourselves.
Hmm.
That's how I
Hmm.
see motivation. How about you?
So, well, what I hear you saying is like one thing, a big thing that can be very motivating is having this sort of conception of the person you want to be or the person you have the potential to become, and then start living in alignment with the choices that person would make, um, which I think that resonates very deeply with me because for years I lived a very unhealthy lifestyle, and it wasn't until actually I had my third child, took three of them to make me realize that I needed to be healthy for them. I needed to be not just healthy for them, but also, what kind of habits were they learning from
Yeah.
me? How was so this new identity, I think what you're getting at is like how motivation can be so tied into the identity you hold for yourself.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. 100%. And I think in order to create that identity, to really get to know ourselves first, right? Like I think sometimes,
Hmm.
you and I, we both admire Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. And I remember her saying this. She's like, most of us in modern life, our body and our minds are not even in the same zip code. I don't know if you've heard
Hmm.
her say that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
They're
So I
totally in two different places. Yeah.
totally two different places. So, how do we know where we want to get to if we haven't taken the time? And we deserve to, right? Like we're all deserving beings that we need to sometimes we get so carried away by our day-to-day stuff. There's the cooking and the cleaning and the jobs and the kids and the so sometimes just taking even like 3 to 5 minutes sit quietly in a corner and just kind of think about where are you in your life right now, whether it has to do with your health, whether it has to do with your career, right, relationships, and go, maybe I can make this a little bit
Hmm.
better. I would be in a
Hmm.
better position. And I think that can then start driving motivation to take the steps you need to get from point A to point B.
That's super fascinating and also resonates with me. I'll tell you a lot of the changes I've made in the last 6, 7 years started when I started taking a little bit of time,
Mhm.
quiet time and stillness. I actually started doing it in my car because there was no place in my house that I could get.
Yes.
And it was before I walked into the door at the end of the day. And what I wasn't expecting is exactly what you said. Was like initially I was just like, oh, I'll just sort of like be calmer, but it then creates a space where you start to understand what are some of the thoughts that are underneath everything that is underlying the way I'm living my life, and what is the type of person I want to be, and then you sort of have to reconcile that if you're
Hmm.
not. Yeah, so the stillness, I totally agree, is super important. You said something else too, which I think about our level of motivation when we haven't done something. This is something I want
Mm,
to ask you about too, is often just very low, right? This is why I think we don't do most things,
mm,
because we've never done it before. So there's so much uncertainty about should I do that thing, and what do? We come up with all sorts of reasons then why it wouldn't work or we shouldn't do it.
mhm.
Um, so so knowing that, I don't know, I want to get your opinion on this. Like, how do people overcome that sort of initial, um, there's sort of momentum you need. And maybe this is a good place to talk about different types of motivation and how one might think about those and utilize them.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think we can talk about different types of motivation, but to answer your question about sort of getting going and being like, is this going to work, not going to work, right? I mean, these are things I think every human faces, right? Like, I mean, I still remember when I was in high school and my father was like, you need to sit and study so you can get good grades and get into medical school. And sometimes when you're exhausted, you're like, yeah, I'm putting in all this time and effort, but the results are not guaranteed, right? And so our mind can make come up with these excuses like why bother, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of it comes from fear, right? Fear of failure. And our
Mm,
mind or our brain is trying to protect us from feeling disappointed. So let's just take even a very concrete example that we deal with at Mora a lot, right? Dr. Rack is
yeah.
coming to us wanting to lose weight. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that. And, I always tell them, and I'm sure you do too, weight loss doesn't necessarily begin in the gym or in the kitchen. It begins in the
Mm,
mind. When we can
mm,
change our mindset, when we can dial
mm,
into our why, which is really what we're talking about when we talk about motivation, right? And our purpose and our wanting to do
mm,
this, we have to do that work because
mm,
that's why a lot of these diet plans don't work in the long term. And I think we can kind of go into that extrinsic
Yeah.
versus intrinsic motivation piece. But did I answer the question? Because
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
I go
Well, I really,
tangential.
no, no, I think you're right. I think when level of motivation is low, you first have to understand why it is, why would I even do this thing? And
Right.
yeah, it's going to be maybe different and a little scary. And if I don't have a really good reason, like, then, I'm probably not gonna. And so that reason, I think, gets back to like, what is the type of person I want to be? Like,
Yes.
what am I trying? What type of life am I trying to live? Like, how do I see my future in 10 years? And like, what am I
Mhm.
doing today that create? Yeah, I totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
So I like what you said about like needing to visualize, right? Like believing that you can become the person that you're wanting to become. It starts with belief too, right? You have to
Mm,
have this has to be some part of you that says, it looks pretty hopeless right now, and I'm recognizing all these fear thoughts. I call them the little monsters in our brain, and we all have them, the inner critic, right? Who's always like, oh, you can't do that. You failed so many times before. Why would you even bother trying, et cetera, et
mm,
cetera. We have our own sort of, because all our brain is trying to do is keep us safe, right?
keep us safe.
And
Yeah,
safety is the known devil, right? So even if like, let's say I'm 350 pounds, I know what 350 pounds feels like. I know how it affects my
yeah,
life. And
yeah.
so it seems almost too big to think about my 150-pound future self. And the brain's
Mm,
going to immediately go, what? You want to lose 200 pounds? You want to do this? Are you crazy? And so starting to recognize that, I think, is super important as well, that we have our own naysayers. We don't even need outside people telling us why we can't do a certain thing.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, just starting with that. And that's why I think those moments of reflection and diving in and really recognizing the power that we have, that we can change our thoughts. Like, this is such a
Mm,
crazy concept. And before I went to coach training, if somebody had told me that, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Because I think for most of us, we're controlled by our thoughts, and we truly believe that we can change them until you realize
yeah.
you can.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and we have a Facebook user who said, I think a lot of people think I can't, like I can't after they fail. And so there's this narrative that sort of gets created. Okay, I'm not the type of person
Yes.
that can do this. Now, unknowingly, they're creating an identity that is someone who won't. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
I want to just say to everyone, anyone watching live, you can certainly ask questions in the chat. So we're talking about motivation too, but if you have a lifestyle medicine question, both of us are certified in lifestyle medicine, then feel free to ask questions in the chat. Again, we're from Mora Medical. You can find us at mora.com, Mora.com. We will help you achieve your health goals, whatever that may be, losing weight or reversing chronic disease. And the way we do that is with helping you use the power of your own motivation to make changes, lasting changes to your lifestyle habits. And that's why we're talking about motivation today, is because it's, I think, gets talked about a lot, but it's a kind of the key for forward momentum. So your motivation, I think, speaks to like the most important thing, which is whether or not you're consistent. Because
Mhm.
you can think about the results all you want.
Mhm.
It's it can be scary and also fun and exciting to think about the results.
Mhm.
Like, oh, what will I be things be like when I'm super fit and lose all that weight, or finish that race. Those things are exciting, but I think the real work is like, okay, I've signed up for that race or I have that goal. Like, what is the day to day to day? And I think that really gets into like how you design your behaviors, where your
Mhm.
motivation is at. You know what I mean?
I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny when it comes to challenges, right? Because sometimes I think this has been my experience, Rock. I don't know what your experience has been, but when I have my inner critic telling me I can't do this, I can't do that, and I get kind of lost in that loop, it seems like sometimes it's easier for me to just give up. But if somebody
Mm.
else tells me you can't do this, I take it as a challenge. I'm like, I'm going to show you.
That's right.
So it's kind
That's
of
right.
funny. But again, that recognition came because, I mean, who else has lived inside my brain except myself for all the time that I've been on this earth, right? I was
Yeah.
wondering what your sort of life experience has been around that when you're challenged internally or
Mm.
externally.
I no, it's really interesting. I don't. I guess increasingly, like I'm trying not to. I certainly want to live up to my own standards and have a
Mhm.
standard for myself. And I wonder, I a lot of like what I've done throughout my life, I feel like has been sort of for the acceptance or approval
Mm.
about not only, right? I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm.
there was always like, so this I think gets into like, we've talked about this a lot, intrinsic versus extrinsic
Yes.
motivation. So like
Yes.
extrinsically, like, am I living up to like when I was a kid and I was doing well in school?
Mhm,
It was some part of it, a certain big part of it was like,
mhm,
oh, I saw that like my teachers and my parents were like, I got praise for that. And, there's this external reward.
mhm,
Um, Praise is one. It could be, you get a bonus at work if you work.
mhm,
It could be monetary. I mean, there's a lot of um, extrinsic things that motivate us.
mhm.
And and then there's intrinsic things. Like, how do you think about that, Dr. Yashoda?
Yeah, I was reading this article actually, and I shared it actually, but they talk about even under like the umbrella of extrinsic motivation, sort of either it's guilt driven or it's people pleasing. So I kind of started thinking about that, right? So for example, I know a lot of our patients might have had struggles with their weight, or diabetes or any other chronic illnesses, maybe even as early as their childhood, right? So they're starting to get messages from their surroundings, maybe their parents, their siblings, their friends, their peers, like when kids get teased on the playground, for example, for maybe being a little bit, quote unquote, chubby. So that kind of motivation where they're being sort of, poked at, and then it's guilt driven, right? They're like, I got to lose weight because I want society to see
Mm,
me a certain way. They don't want to
yeah,
see me as this person who,
yeah,
can't lose weight. So that's a
yeah,
guilt driven extrinsic
mm,
motivation.
yeah,
The other type is what you mentioned, which is the people pleasing type of extrinsic motivation. Like,
mm,
your parents go, hey, we'll take you on a nice holiday because you got all A's, or, you know, or whatever it might be, right? So I think we lost Dr. Rack. I hope he comes back. I'm just going to keep talking about motivation. So when we think about like what motivates us in our life, I think it's important to distinguish that, right? Is Are we being driven to make these behavioral changes because of sort of people pleasing, or because society tells us we have to be a certain way, or whatever that might be. um, and then there is intrinsic motivation, which I'm going to talk about if once Dr. Rack comes back on. There you are. Kind of dropped out for a minute, but I
yeah.
just kept
I don't,
going.
no, good. Were you still on the stream? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
my
yeah, 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 yeah. So,
um,
Rak, I was just talking about like, carrying it further about extrinsic motivation, asking people to sort of think about, do they think it's guilt driven maybe, or is it from a people pleasing perspective, right? So that's one aspect of
yeah,
extrinsic motivation. um, I want you to, yeah, I want to think about sort of the in and I think studies have also shown that extrinsic motivation is necessary sometimes and important. That's not necessarily a bad thing to get us started on the path, right? So sometimes even like if you could also do like a self-rewarding system. And I know a lot of women will say that they'll be like, I bought this dress that's like 3 sizes smaller than what I wear now, and so I want to lose weight in order to fit into that dress for my son's wedding or graduation or whatever. that's an example of an extrinsic motivation that you've sort of created for
Yeah,
yourself because you want to appear a certain way in society. And there is honestly, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that.
right.
But the caveat being that you also have to start working on intrinsic motivation because extrinsic motivation will only carry you so far,
Yeah, that's
right?
that's that's right. It because what, yeah, it maybe goes back to like the why, which is like I may really want to look good in that dress, but what's beyond that? Like,
Mm,
why do I want to look good in that dress? You know,
yeah.
is it that I want, like you said, is that I want acceptance and approval from others? But often when you dig down into this question, I often find I get to a similar point with a lot of people, which is that really they're at a place where they may not accept themselves,
Mm,
and they want to get to a place where they accept themselves. And then this breakthrough happened for me where I realized, oh, I don't have to change to accept myself. Like, I can
mm,
accept myself where I am right now. I can want to change. I
mm-hmm.
can want things to be different, and I can accept where I am right now. I think that, like, for me, that was like the breakthrough to actually move forward, because so many people don't accept where they are now, and their frustration or their challenge comes from wanting things to be different, and not and not being able to get there because they're so frustrated and challenged. Like, it's like accepting where you are actually puts you in the headspace to make the changes for things to be different. I don't know, maybe this is a little too like,
No, I love that. I love what you said. And I think, we at Mora, amongst ourselves, but also trying to bring it to our patients, have been talking about the concepts of positive self-talk and self-compassion, right? I
mm.
think you're really touching upon those concepts because, again, whether it's social conditioning. Oh, there's Dr. Marvis.
It's
Hey,
Dr. Marvis.
Lori.
Sorry, were you in the waiting room long? We were
Not
just
very
so
long.
wrapped up in this conversation.
Oh no.
Not very long.
Hi.
Hello.
We were just like going into self-talk. We're talking about
Yeah.
positive self-talk
Oh,
and
self-talk always comes
self-compassion.
up.
Yeah, yeah,
Self-talk
yeah.
is, that's like, we should call this the weekly Mora self-talk.
Self-talk.
Yeah.
Should get
How are
some.
you, Dr. Lori?
Good, good. Yes, I was off for a few days, and it's crazy now, of course, when you come back on. And but yeah, it was really good. How are you guys?
We're good.
Good.
We're very good. Yeah.
Good.
I'm actually, this fancy artwork behind me is because we're in the Russian River area for the week. My kids are on spring break, and we're just having like a chill week here. And how was your time off?
Good, good. Where's the Russian River?
It's like north of San Francisco Bay Area,
Oh.
like maybe an hour and a half, like 2 hours north.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's nice because I had family come and visit, and so we went to Disneyland and we walked 12 miles. But it was really interesting because we went in because we're all vegan and plant-based, and we went looking for options. And the majority of the stops there had at least one plant-based option, and it wasn't too bad actually. It wasn't like, and occasionally, they had the Impossible Burger. You had to go looking for the the wraps and different things, but is actually I was surprised and delighted by the options. So there is so if you do go somewhere, there is there, be a little motivated, go hunting, go
Hmm.
looking. They have an app that you can look for, and this is all self-motivation. So I'm trying
It's
to
not.
say
That's right. We what Dr. Shota was talking. I mean, because we were talking about motivation, Dr. Lori, and sort of like we started getting into what where it kind of comes from, and in that discussion, we realized that it boils down to the self-talk often that people have
Mhm.
to themselves, and how they talk to themselves, how they treat themselves, and the acceptance that they have for where they're at. Is that sort of like where you can then start in a place like what did you say, Dr. Sher, at the beginning? Like weight loss doesn't start in the gym or the kitchen, it starts in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It starts in the mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really
So
good point. Yeah, definitely starts in the head, between the
Mm-hmm.
3-pound organ between your ears. Yeah, I just did a presentation for a large company, and it was for their occupational medicine department, and it was really interesting. So they're doing a lot of different things. They're engaging, and telling people to eat healthier, and but what they didn't see was sustainability, right? So they didn't see that sustainable part. So I think it goes back to kind of like, on New Year's Eve, we're like, okay, tomorrow's my first day of the rest of my life. I'm going to eat healthy and run and do all these
right.
things. And it lasts like, I don't know, 2 days to 2 weeks. But they didn't see the sustainability piece. They saw weight gain afterwards. And, we're talking
Yeah.
about their environment, and yet that could be improved. But they're doing other pieces. But what's interesting is, again, it comes back to the self-talk and sustainable change, because yes, we all know what we should be doing, or at least the beginnings of what we should be doing. I think there's more to it than most people realize about the healthy habits.
It's
And
the how. It's
it's the
the
how.
how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is
We
the sustainable how. This is, you sustain it by changing their mindset. And they were saying, I was mentioning our secret sauce is really our groups, seeing them engage with one another. And they're like, you know, give me more details of how you do that. And so I really went into the details and the specifics of the habit change itself, and
mm,
those little things that patients don't think about that are really
mm,
causing a hiccup. Looking at the cycle of a habit in, just their environment. If there's chips laying around, you're going to eat chips. If they're
yeah.
not laying around, you're less likely to eat them. Yeah, and what can you do? Can you stack those little habits to make your easier for you, and just really engaging with the patient in the conversation of what is it going to take for me to change, right? So it's fascinating.
We
Um,
have one Facebook user who wrote something along those lines. I have family who want the health of whole food plant-based and they start and then it becomes too hard. I think
yeah,
it would be good to have little steps and success with little steps and the vision, not the goal.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I think it's those little changes add up and stack up. And BJ Fogg, his book's called Tiny Habits. So if you guys haven't ever read that, that's a really great book to start, maybe for those folks who want to, but then they struggle and find it's too hard. Just break it down into smaller increments. So what was working, do that for a while, and then just add one more small thing. And before you know it, you're there. You're like,
Yeah.
wow, where did all that change happen? You think it's
Yeah.
overnight, but it took maybe 6 months or a year. That's okay too.
Yeah.
You know how they have that, it's kind of a, I don't know, funny, not haha funny, but it's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? I'm like, why would anybody want to eat a whole elephant? But I think the point being that your goal could be really big and then it can seem really overwhelming. And so I think just taking it one day at a time, right? And I think some of us do this where the night before you go to sleep, you're sort of planning what you want your day to go like the next day. Now, life happens and doesn't always go according to plan. But then again, dialing back into that motivation. I mean, we talked about examples of extrinsic motivation, Lori, before you came on.
Mm.
And we were talking about how extrinsic motivation can be driven either by guilt or people pleasing, and maybe it can help you get started on the path, but to keep that sustainability going, like you said, people do have to dive in and figure out like the intrinsic motivation. So maybe Laurie, you can talk about that. Like, what do you think when you think about like intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, so the intrinsic motivation is when the going gets tough, the things that really keep you going, right? So it's that voice in your head, and I think it only goes back to self-talk. It's
Self-talk.
your belief, right? Because how do you change your beliefs about yourself? So if you think about it, if you are a non-smoker, or let's say that you were a smoker at one point and then you stopped because you just like said, I'm not going to be a smoker, I'm not a non-smoker. Those who stay non-smoking are going to be the ones who are saying, I'm a non-smoker, I don't smoke, what are you talking about? Even though they smoked for 20 years, now they're telling you, I don't smoke because I'm a non-smoker. Versus those who maybe they smoke, they quit, and they're like, it's so hard to quit. I'm quitting smoking, or I quit smoking. They're still identifying as a smoker, but now they're a smoker that has quit. So it's just a matter of
Yeah.
time before they hit, a difficult passage in life, or they really struggle. And then suddenly they see, well, just one cigarette will be okay. I'll be okay. It's kind of like the alcoholic who doesn't identify as a teetotaler and
That's right.
non-drinker, right? You just change your belief. And then if you understand that your belief about yourself and who you intrinsically are as a person, who we identify as, those you're going to really try to align. Because if you do something that you don't believe, for example, I could never eat meat again. I just can't. The thought of eating meat, even though I was a meat eater for 4 decades, now I am not a meat eater. I don't eat meat. I don't eat dairy. I just can't, because I really honestly would rather not eat than to eat and consume that. So some people may say, oh, what if you're on the desert island and the pig and the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, first of all, I'll never be on a desert island with just a pig. Anyway, in reality, I live in the United States, and where I travel there's going to be options. So, again,
That's right.
it goes back to, it's like those who exercise every day. They identify as a runner. They identify as a yogi. They identify as whatever. It's just
Absolutely.
it's just the way it is. That starts with.
I think having that identity is key. Understanding what you want that identity to be. That is kind of like Dr. Shishon and I were talking about, the why. But then the amazing thing about these self-talk practices and chat, the listening to recordings basically of self-talk, is that is the how. That's like, how do you change the programming? It's like I have known for several years, it keeps kind of changing, but like, this is what I'm working towards. This is the type of person I want to be. Keeps up more, one is being aware of that, but people, even if you're aware of like the type of person you want to be, I know a lot of people who know the things they want to do, the things they want to accomplish, the type of person they want to be, and then they're not doing the things to get them there. And they actually, like, it's almost more tormenting because they're like, I know what I should be doing. It's what I call the knowledge action gap. So you know what to do, but you're not doing it. You'd almost like, then people feel guilty about it, or they feel so. The self-talk piece is like, okay, now I have a way to like reprogram myself. And I've been doing it for a few weeks, and I already see myself changing. It's quite. And we have someone actually in the comments who told us about Self-Talk Plus, and my daughter tried it yesterday, telling me she is a winner and she really loves that message. And she's going to listen. Oh, that's so wonderful. Wow. She's going to listen to that message every day, and she's going to start believing that she, her self-worth is going to go up. Her belief in herself is going to go up, because that's the belief that she's going to have because she's listening to it every day. I mean, that's really powerful, really powerful.
When I interviewed the author of the self-talk, he really mentioned what was really fun, excuse me, was the ones are the self-confidence piece is really important, and understanding that you're worthy and love, to do the things that will provide the health that you deserve. And it's really interesting to me especially with women. I don't know, I haven't been inside a man's head, but I've been inside a woman's head for a long time. And, we're really good at beating ourselves up over very small things. Because in our society, we're looking at, societal expectations, but we really struggle to meet all of them. And that's why I feel like social media can be so toxic, right, for young women and young men, for sure, of course. But is it, there's images, and now there's these filters, and people, they don't even look like they do. Zoom has a filter that you can address. I mean, it's really fascinating how we're hiding behind all these things because we're worried about people's perceptions, which have absolutely zero effect on our day-to-day lives, but it makes us feel belonging. We're not. But then you look back in the mirror and you see the real you. You're just like, and that's just the physical attributes. It's not even to do with, all the other things that people talk about. And, It's a really interesting state of affairs we're in.
Yeah, sometimes when I think about all that, I just get overwhelmed. And I'm
It is
like,
slightly overwhelming. Yeah. Happy
what?
Thursday. Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Yeah.
I need to go back on
Dr.
vacation.
Lori.
I'm gonna start on
All right.
Monday.
Well, this was a wonderful
Yeah.
conversation about motivation, and of course, all roads lead to Cell Talk. So we've learned.
Again.
I'll close.
Oh gosh.
Any parting thoughts? Things you'd like to share, Dr. Yashoda?
No, I think just like what we were talking about, taking some time to really focus on where you are and where do you want to be. And then you kind of figure out the how, like you said, right? And those are the tools. I mean, we do this in our group visits with our patients. We talk way more than just giving them a meal plan or giving them the science behind why they need to sleep better. We're really working on the behavioral change piece, which I think at the end of the day is probably the most powerful tool that each one of us have and that we can help them uncover for themselves. And like, how amazing is that to know that we have it within our power to
Mm,
change our future? We don't have to depend on the outside. Circumstances are hard. I mean, it's tough out there. And yet we can be in charge of our own health. So that's what I would
mm.
say to people.
Wow, powerful. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Lori. Any parting
Yeah.
thoughts?
It was interesting because I'm just reflecting on the conversations I was having with this group earlier today, and I think, for me as a doctor and a mom, for example, all three of my kids, maybe I want them to engage in plant-based eating, but I change the message according to one is all about the environment, the other is about health, the other one's a ethical vegan, right? So that message is still the end of the
Mm,
day, the same action as plant-based eating, but the message was different according to the intrinsic or the importance or what you valued. So if you're finding that you're wanting to do a particular activity, maybe think about it and reframing it to something that's more emotionally provoking for you or more important to you. So maybe it is, you want to exercise regularly. So maybe it's not about the exercise itself, but movement. Maybe it's because you want to be more involved with your kids' activities, so you go walking together, you want to increase family bonding. Just try to reframe
mm,
it and think about whatever you can do that the same effect at the end of the day, but just reframe it that things that are most important to you. Because I know I'll walk a mile if I know that my daughter or my son or my husband or my kids, at the end of that mile versus at the end of the mile, I'm going to burn 100 calories. It's a different message, but I'm still the same. So
mm.
does that make sense? I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I love that. Okay, and I want to just there was a question earlier. Somebody asking, how do we tap into our intrinsic motivation if we don't feel like we have it? And that brings us back to Mora. Mora Medical, all of us are trained in helping you tap into your intrinsic motivation, like understand why you're doing these things on a deeper level, understand why you would even want to make changes, and then the how, um, and relating and connecting with other people who are on this same journey. I mean, that connection piece is very motivating. It feels good to not just connect with others, but to be able to provide care and concern for other people. I so many times see in my groups now when we have a new member and some of the veterans who have been coming for a couple of months, they love to share like how they've changed and the things they've learned that were really helpful for them when they started. And that feels good for them. That is a sort of intrinsically motivating. So if you're wanting more motivation in your life, I would say come to Mora Medical, Mora.com. And that's what we're here for, to help you make these changes. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you
Right.
both for being on today. And thank you all for watching either live or if you're watching later recorded. We really appreciate. Please share. And we'll see you back here next week. Thanks a lot.